Well, it's a season of elections. Indian election is coming up. What is happening right now is an election which is happening in the neighborhood, that is in Pakistan. I'm Snehesh Alex Philip, and welcome to the print. So, what's really happening in Pakistan? What happens to Imran Khan? What happens to Nawaz Sharif? Or, for that matter, what happens to Bilawal Bhutto Zardari? And for this, I have with me a distinguished panel of two individuals who are closely connected to Pakistan. I have with me the former ambassador, TCA Raghavan. He was the High Commissioner to Pakistan, and he was there while I was also posted to Pakistan as a journalist for PTI. And I also have with me Sushant Sareen. He is from the ORF, the Observer Research Foundation, and keeps a very close watch on Pakistan, especially when it comes to the security implications. So welcome to the print, both of you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So my first question to you, Raghavan sir, what can be expected from this election? In the sense, we know that the once selected prime minister is now in jail. So what can be expected from this election?
Well, I think what can certainly be expected is that at the end of the electoral process, there will be a new government with some new faces. And while structures are important and certainly there's going to be a great deal of continuity in the structures of power in Pakistan, but nevertheless, changes of personnel at the head of government are also important. If it is, as is generally expected, that former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif will possibly become Prime Minister again with, if not a majority, at least a coalition which has been consolidated around him. I think it does mean to some extent, a change in Pakistan's politics, and certainly will imply some change. I don't think we should exaggerate the impact of that change, but also not minimize it. Some change in the India-Pakistan horizon.
Well, Sushant, Raghavan sir has mentioned this interesting point that there is going to be change in politics, and there would be some little bit of change when it comes to relations with India. But in Pakistan, does it really matter who becomes the prime minister? Nawaz Sharif was the same man who was ousted by the military, and now the military wants to bring him back.
I think as long as the military remains pretty much in control, and the military's control right now is comparable to what it was during the dictatorship days of Zia, or for that matter, even Musharraf. I don't think there's going to be any, it doesn't make any difference who comes into power, who wins the election. And I say this for a couple of reasons. Number one, yeah, there will be some change as far as cosmetics are concerned, as far as the optics are concerned, as far as the kind of, the language which is used from the Pakistani side and then responded to from the Indian side. Indian side still remains quite decent about it. But the kind of language which comes from the Pakistani side, I think that could change somewhat. But I don't think substantively anything is going to change, simply because, number one, Nawaz Sharif will not have the kind of bandwidth or the kind of populist support that he could then, use to try and enter into a normalization process with India. Number two, I think it's very clear what kind of a man Asim Munir is, what his manifesto is, because we keep looking at political party manifestos, but look at Asim Munir's manifesto. One indication of that is, his interaction with students a couple of weeks back in Islamabad, or was it in Lahore? I'm not very sure.
Yeah.
And the kind of stuff he said out there, especially in relation to India. And that gives you an idea of, what his mindset is. Look at the ground situation as far as issues of terrorism, infiltration, that is concerned. And it's very clear. Look at the kind of rhetoric coming out of the Pakistan Foreign Office, which basically is taking its cue from the GHQ. So it's very clear that's not going to change. And then there is going to be an opposition which will be ever ready to hurl the charge of Modi ka yaar Gaddar on Nawaz Sharif. And then because he has his own economic and other compulsions, I think he would probably want to put down his head and try and fix that and not open a second front with the army. Although I myself believe that if they continue to have this level of a hostile relationship with India, then there are inherent limits to what they can do to fix their own economy, and all those grand projects of connectivity and geoeconomics and what have you. I think there are inherent limitations in that. So I personally, it's interesting what's happening in Pakistan, simply because Mr. Raghavan and I are probably both Pakistan junkies. But other than that, nothing really is going to change substantively.
Shushant, I love your point where you said that while we are looking at the manifesto of, let's say, Nawaz Sharif, PPP, and the others, the real thing is what does the manifesto of General Munir really say? And sir, that's what I want you to I would want to know more from you. We've all heard of the so-called Bajwa doctrine. And Bajwa was a person, who I think in his wisdom realized that it's important to have good relations or decent relations with India, because Pakistan was facing much larger issues in terms of what's happening on the other side of the border and also with the economy. But how do you see Munir? Is there a Munir doctrine, sir? And would it replace the so-called Bajwa doctrine?
Well, I've always felt that, rather than see what people say, because we should assess what they are doing. And uh, between Generals Bajwa and General Munir, in fact, the one substantial element of continuity has been that the LOC ceasefire has held quite well. Now, that tells me that actually there is much more continuity than, sometimes we analysts over examine situations and look for change where there is not. The compulsions which were there during Bajwa's time, that he was overextended, and therefore it was in his interest and Pakistan's interest to stabilize relations with India. That situation is the same today. I take Sushant's point about the structures of politics and the structures of authority in Pakistan. But the point is that we are an immediate neighbor of Pakistan, and we don't have the luxury of taking a long-term view or a bird's eye view and looking only at the structures. Every shift in nuance is something which is significant for us, because there may be opportunities. And we should never foreclose opportunities, because the fact is that while India-Pakistan relations, of course, is in a category by itself, but it also is part of a wider regional equation. And we don't want our regional situation in holistic terms to deteriorate or to continue to deteriorate. So you today have a very, very bad situation in Myanmar. You have an unsettled situation on the line of actual control with China. You have numerous uncertainties in Afghanistan. To the extent possible that you can stabilize relations with Pakistan a little more, that is in your overall interest. And therefore, as I said, small shifts or small nuances are significant, and we shouldn't really just go by the general assessment that the Pakistan army has a major role to play, and therefore nothing will change unless it changes. A great deal will also depend on how we assess the changes in Pakistan and what we decide to do in the coming months.
Well, that is true, sir. And Shishant, Raghavan sir mentioned this point about the fact that, whatever that has happened, the fact is that the LOC ceasefire has continued. And while a lot believe that it is in Pakistan's interest, and I also believe that, of course, it is in Pakistan's interest. But the fact, my take is that the LOC, the sanctity of the ceasefire has been maintained because India is also interested in maintaining that. Otherwise, there have been numerous occasions. Infiltration has continued to happen. You had, killing of ambushes of soldiers by terrorists who have infiltrated from there. Shootouts have happened. There has been certain cases of ceasefire violations by Pakistan, but still India held on. So would you agree with what Raghavan sir has said, that there is a lot at stake, not just for Pakistan, but for India as well?
Yeah. So look, I don't have any problems in accepting that a ceasefire is in the interest of both countries. There'll be many other things which will be in the interest of both countries, and both sides will do it because they have their own interests and their own compulsions, and will enter into these kind of arrangements. And I don't have any problem with that. My point is that beyond that, if anybody expects that there'll be yet another round of, and there could be, you never know, we are suckers for punishment. So we might do it all over again. But, uh, if we really think that there will be, suddenly a new love fest which will start between the two countries, we'll move towards normalization, open borders, what have you, all that, all those wet dreams which many people have in India, especially. I don't see that happen. I don't see that going any distance. There might be some channels of communication that might open, if at all. But look, you also have to understand when Mr. Raghavan talks about the nuances. I think it is just as important to see what is said than to see what is done. Because if you actually are wanting to change the paradigm of relationship, then what you say is just as important as what you do. And what I mean by that is that if you look at what Nawaz Sharif is saying, yeah, he'll say that, yeah, we need peace on our borders. That's like saying, I love my mother, right? Uh, that's a no brainer. But the point is that you take it the next step. And then he says that, yeah, but there can be no forward movement with India until and unless the constitutional reforms of
Yeah.
2019 are reversed. That's not going to happen. Now, that's like saying that, okay, fine, we don't want to move ahead. Or they will have to climb down the high horse they've climbed. And what that means is that the opposition will then take pot shots at them, and then they'll back off, because there will be a lot of other stuff he has to do domestically, which is going to put a lot of pressure on him or his government. So I think it is extremely important to see what, for example, is the army chief saying. He says India has not accepted our existence. That's what he has said. How can we make peace with India when India has not accepted our? Now you have been posted out there. Mr. Raghavan has gone as an Indian ambassador. What more example do you need that you accept the existence of a country than to have diplomatic relations with that country and post ambassadors out there? And yet, if you have a guy from this kind of a background like Asim Munir is, who's probably thinks he's mullah in chief rather than military man in chief, I don't see any forward movement taking place. But call me a skeptic, call me a cynic, call me what you will, but I don't see anything much happen.
You know, Raghavan sir, the fact that he said that he call him a skeptic or whatever. The fact is that he doesn't expect any much of a forward movement. I belong to the school of thought in which I believe that at least both countries should look at just being good neighbors, if not great friends. And with Pakistan, it becomes very difficult. So if tomorrow, Nawaz Sharif comes to power, and in the past he's made these comments about, having better relations with India, and that's been his characteristics way back also, because more than a politician, he's also a shrewd businessman. He understands business. But do you think that, you have taken the level too high up, like calling for the repeal of the Article 370, going for the government to go back? Is it has they spoken out too much for them to really come down? And as Sushant said, that he would be someone who would be targeted immediately by the opposition.
Let's not forget that your stated formal positions on different issues have never been a barrier to India and Pakistan taking things forward. So while it may appear that their position on the legislative changes of 2019 are an insurmountable barrier, in the past, the same argument used to be made about Jammu and Kashmir as a whole, that how can you move forward when you have such fundamental differences on both sides? So stated positions actually never act as an insurmountable barrier if both sides decide on moving ahead. It becomes a kind of a technical objection rather than anything else, and that can always be circumvented. Now, you're quite right about the compulsions on Nawaz Sharif and the possible weaknesses he will have. But as I said, a great deal depends on what you decide to do. Because let's not forget that in the India-Pakistan dynamic, a major part of the initiative always comes from India. And because India, in a sense, throws its hat into the rings, that makes up for numerous weaknesses on the Pakistani side. It's very much of a bilateral process when it takes place. So a great deal will depend on how you want to move ahead. If you say that it's not in my interest to move ahead, or it doesn't suit me for whatever reason to move ahead, it doesn't matter what is the architecture which emerges in Pakistan, things will not move ahead. But if you do decide to move ahead for whatever reason, and I think one reason certainly will be the overall situation, the regional situation that we are already confronted with, and that we are going to continue to face with greater intensity in the future. I think that will be a factor in your deciding to at least change to move away from the existing impasse. I don't think in the short term you will suddenly have mountains being moved because initiatives are being taken. No, I think what we will see are some kind of limited stabilization initiatives. What form they take, it's difficult to say, but certainly some efforts to stabilize the situation further, because right now you have a situation where you don't have high commissioners in place. There's effectively no diplomatic or political dialogue. There's a total ban on trade from one side, and we have taken measures on the other hand, which also effectively mean a ban on trade. There's virtually no traffic between the two countries. All of that means that, yes, you have a certain minimum level of stability because of the ceasefire, but it's a very brittle situation. So I think possibly in the months ahead and perhaps after our elections, depending on the results, there will be some efforts to try to impart more stability to the situation, reduce to some extent the brittleness. I don't think immediately we will look at long-term big bang moves, but certainly some limited moves are possible.
Well, Sushant, while we talk about India and Pakistan, the fact is that there are a number of other players in this relationship. For example, the US has always been a player. The Brits, for that matter, the UK is a very strong player. It's not seen in public, but UK has its own ways of working behind the thing. Now we also have China. Like China, from whatever that I have gathered so far, is that China uh, is also, wanting India and Pakistan to have some kind of a good relations because their investment in Pakistan matters to them. And then there is, of course, India's larger, reach out and relationship, which is growing with the Islamic countries led by Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other countries, including with Qatar, where, of course, we have a situation of our naval veterans in jail now, but eventually they would be back, hopefully. But how much of these countries do really play a role going ahead in the Indo-Pak ties, Sushant?
Okay, Snehesh, before I come to your question, let me just push back, if I can, to what Ambassador Raghavan was saying. And I'll make three very quick points. One, we had, before this caretaker regime, we had 16 months of Shahbaz Sharif. There were nice cosmetics, greetings were exchanged. What did Shahbaz Sharif do any different from what Imran Khan was already doing? And you can say that he was hemmed in because of their own problems. You can say that, there was the army breathing down his neck, although for almost about 8 months, Bajwa was still very much in charge. But we saw what happened at that point of time. Why would we imagine that something any different? I'm sure the Pakistanis don't want to upset or have a very destabilized Eastern Front when the Western Front is destabilized. And that works for us as well. But this is a very tenuous kind of a peace which is existing between the two sides, and we need to be mindful of that. Secondly, you know, the problem really is that if you are not going to change your stated positions or not state them time and time again every time you want to make a proposal or you want to reach out to the other side, if you're going to keep your stated positions intact, this has been precisely the problem for so many decades. So we might be talking to each other, but have we moved forward? When have we ever moved forward with the Pakistanis? Unless, of course, we say that, okay, fine, we were holding a dialogue on the composite dialogue and other thing. But please read the dispatches of the composite dialogue. They all ended with a single sentence that they met, they stated their positions, and they dispersed. It's crazy what is whatever I have seen. I'm sure Mr. Raghavan has seen much more than what I have seen. I've only seen what's been there in the public domain. So it's quite crazy what if neither side is willing to compromise, then I don't see how you can move forward. And the third is that if India keeps taking the initiative, I think the messaging of that is very negative from the Pakistani perspective, because the Pakistanis think, oh, these baniyas, we made them come down to our level again. We made them to succumb to us, and then this kind of emboldens them to keep pushing the envelope. So those are my three very quick points. On the other questions which you raised, look, if we are going to depend upon the Brits to make peace between India and Pakistan, you can expect another partition taking place, right? Please keep the Brits out. Wherever they've entered, they made a complete hash of things. Okay? Unless we want to repeat the history of the past, I think keep the Brits out. Don't listen to them. Don't engage with them on Pakistan at all. They'll only play troublemaker. They've never been an honest broker. The Americans, I think they have lost a lot of their political capital as far as India and Pakistan are concerned, especially in trying to effect any kind of a rapprochement between the two countries. And I'll give you just one recent poll which says that only about 5.9% of the people polled in that particular poll had any kind of expectation or any kind of wanted any kind of improvement in relations with America. And contrary to that, almost about 7.5% wanted it with India. So, that should tell you where America lies and whether it can play an honest broker or not. Number three, and more importantly, I don't think we've ever wanted an honest broker between us and the Pakistanis. Number four, on China, look, I don't buy. I think the Chinese would be telling the Pakistanis that don't mess with the Indians right now because you can't afford it, you can't manage it. Put your own house in order before you take on the Indians. I don't think the Chinese are very interested in India and Pakistan becoming great friends so that then their investments are taken care of. I don't think that's happening. And if the Chinese were so interested, then they would not have been so bloody minded on the LSE with us. So I think we need to be very careful on when we talk about the Chinese factor. And as far as the Middle East is concerned, the Arab world is concerned, I think, that old framework in which we were working with the Arab world, I think that's been completely upended today. The Arab world
Absolutely.
is far more, open to engaging with India, investing in India. Look at the terms and conditions that they are imposing on the Pakistanis to go and invest in Pakistan, compared to how the alacrity they are ready to come into India and do business with India, engage with India. Political level engagement, military level engagements, diplomatic initiatives which are taking place. Not many of them have taken off completely, but things like IMEC, things like I2U2, was this conceivable 20 years back? Do you think this would have happened 20 years back? Yes, the Arab world will certainly tell the Pakistanis to cool it, to not be bloody minded with India because their interests are involved. But I don't think the Arabs would really want to intervene, maybe knock some sense into the Pakistani heads. But beyond that, I don't think they are going to weigh in very heavily on this. They understand what our sensitivities are. I'm not entirely sure whether the Arab world will want to enter this fracas. between India and Pakistan.
Oh, I completely get your point. I didn't mean, them as being as a broker between the two countries. It's a bilateral thing. India will deal with Pakistan on its own. But just wanted to understand, as you rightly said, the pressures that they could bring on Pakistan for it. Last question to both of you, Raghavan sir. In your way, how should India move ahead?
I think we should carefully assess what is going to happen in Pakistan, and if there are half opportunities, try to make use of them. A great deal of what Sushant said is informed by an experience of Pakistan in the past, and it's always good to keep that experience in mind. But it's also good to remember that your experience with uh, all of your neighbors has never been entirely a pleasant or a happy one. But you have to deal with them, you have to engage with them. And if you look at relations with Nepal or currently relations with Maldives, these ups and
Maldives.
downs are always there. But you don't have the luxury of saying that because these guys behaved like this in the past, I'm not going to have anything to do with them in the future. I mean, uh, however realistic that view may appear, or however commonsensical that view may appear, in the real world, that option is not a real option. You don't have that luxury. You have to deal with Pakistan as it is, and you can't deal with it as you would like it to be, or as you would aspire it to be in the future. There is the all of Pakistan's problems are going to remain, but that still doesn't mean that you have the option of saying that nothing more. I'm turning on my back and I'll forget about this problem. It's not a viable policy uh, position for you to take. So I would say that let's see what happens in the election. Let's see what are the kind of noises which come out of the government, and more importantly, let's see how. Let's take an internal decision on what we want to do. Because do we want to remain frozen at this low, at this very low plateau of quote unquote stability, or do you want to move forward a little, try to ease up the situation in some way, and then see what are the other opportunities that emerge?
And Sushant, what about you? How do you think India should move ahead?
Look, I agree that we need to assess how the situation is going to be panning out. I'm certainly open to the idea that if there is any kind of a forward movement from the Pakistani side, uh, there's no reason why we should not respond to it. And I completely agree with Mr. Raghavan that we need to deal with Pakistan the way it is, rather than what we would want it to be or what we would imagine it to be. And unfortunately, a lot of our dealings with Pakistan have been based out of a sense of romanticism and nostalgia rather than realism. And the fact of the matter is that in the case of Pakistan, the past is always a very good idea and a very good pointer to what's likely to happen in the future, unless you've seen any change in the objective conditions. Now, I would be very happy to see a change in objective conditions to come to the conclusion that yes, maybe the metrics of the past do not apply to whatever path we want to pursue in the future. But until and unless I see any kind of change in those objective conditions, for example, when I see an army chief who's overbearing, who is literally like the lord and master today, almost like a dictator who's got this puppet parliament coming into office, when I see a guy like him openly tell kids that India has not accepted the reality of Pakistan's existence, as though Pakistan has accepted India's reality, right? But the fact is that when you see a guy like him say what he is saying, and you see all the other rhetoric which is going on in Pakistan, including within the Pakistan army, it tells you that the objective reality of how the Pakistanis are looking at India has not changed. When you look at people in the political domain in Pakistan, keep saying the same thing over and over again, just go back 2 days on 5th of February and the kind of statements that were made. It tells you that the objective conditions have not changed. And I could keep on and on and go on for the whole evening and keep telling you how the objective conditions have not changed. Now, if you show me how objective conditions have actually changed, I'll say, yes, let's grab the opportunity. Why not? I'm not bloody minded about it. But until I see that, I'm not biting.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much, both of you, for speaking to the print. And only time will tell whether there is any actual forward movement as such. But I personally believe that a lot of Indo-Pak relations, the future of Indo-Pak relations, actually lies with Pakistan rather than India. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining this discussion at the print, and hope to catch up with you once again once the results are out and once the new government is formed, and then we'll carry this
Can
discussion
I just
further.
add one sentence? Another of the
Absolutely.
objective realities which have not changed. The fact that groups like the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed were openly marching on the streets of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, threatening jihad against India without any let or hindrance by the Pakistani regime. If that is not, staying with the objective reality of the past, what is?
Well, there you go. That's a good point that you mentioned. But as I said, we'll come back in a few weeks from now, and we'll take it forward from here. Thank you so much for joining us on this discussion at the print. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.